Welcome everyone to episode 3 of the 3 Minutes on the Clock podcast. Today we have another NFL mock draft. This is our second mock draft. 2 weeks ago we did one. We got 16,000 views and around 80 subs since then. So thank you to everyone who watched and subscribed since the start of this series. This mock draft is 2 rounds and we also have trades. So that adds a little bit extra spice than the last one did, so without further ado, let's get right into it. And look, we already have a trade, as the number 1 overall pick is headed from the Arizona Cardinals to the Oakland Raiders. John Gruden got so many assets this season by trading away Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper. Obviously, it worked out for the teams that got Cooper and Mack, but the Raiders have a bunch of draft capital. They have Mike Mayock, who knows a lot about the NFL draft, and there's a player that the Raiders probably really like. So, the Raiders will be getting the first pick. The Cardinals will be getting the 4th pick. The 24th pick, which was from the Khalil Mack trade. The 35th pick in a 2024 rounder. That is a lot that the Cardinals are getting. And that's a lot for the Raiders to give up to move just 3 spots up. But when you're this high in the draft, it takes a lot of assets to move from 4 to 1. So this could work out for Oakland. The first pick, the Oakland Raiders select Nick BOSA, defensive end, Ohio State. It seems pretty likely that the first pick will be Nick BOSA. In my first mock draft, I had the Cardinals going with Quinnen Williams, which I'm not going to rule that out. Quinnen Williams could have a really good combine, but right now Nick BOSA is the favorite. And when you look at the Raiders, they have 2 young defensive tackles in Mo Hurst and in P.J. Hall, who had solid rookie years last year, so they could use an edge presence who is a dominant player, sort of like a Khalil Mack. And why not with probably the best player in the draft in most people's eyes, in Nick BOSA, really good pass rusher from Ohio State, and I think value-wise this is a solid pick for Oakland. I like Ed Oliver and Quinnen Williams a little bit better, but Nick BOSA is a phenomenal player. With the second pick, the San Francisco 49ers select Josh Allen, edge rusher, Kentucky. Everyone got really pissed off at me in the comments for my first mock draft because I had Allen being picked at 12 to the Packers, and I didn't realize Allen was going to go as high as he did, so there you go. Anyway, I have Allen at 2 to the 49ers. When you look at Allen, he's super versatile, which is probably why he's going so high. His listed position is an edge rusher, which means he can play defensive tackle and outside linebacker. He can even play a little bit of inside linebacker, which you don't see from a lot of edge rushers, showing that he has some cover ability, but obviously his best attribute is his pass rushing. He's very good at getting to the quarterback, and San Francisco has some solid players on their defensive line. DeForest Buckner, who's excellent. Solomon Thomas, Eric Armstead, solid players, but none of those guys are really experts in getting to the quarterback, which I think is why they could use a player like Josh Allen. With the 3rd pick, the New York Jets select Quinnen Williams, defensive lineman, Alabama. Quinnen Williams is somewhat similar to Jets' current defensive lineman, Leonard Williams. They're both primarily defensive tackles. They can both play a little bit of end. And obviously, when you take on the Jets, the main thing the offensive line is focused on is stopping Leonard Williams. But if you have Leonard Williams and Quinnen Williams on their defensive line, then things are going to get a lot harder for opposing offenses. That can create a lot of mismatches, and that could be really good for the Jets' defense. And the best offense is a good defense, so you're welcome, Darnold. 4th pick, the Arizona Cardinals select Devin White, inside linebacker, LSU. The Cardinals' current middle linebacker is Josh Bynes, who is an exceptional, and the Cardinals could use that inside presence, someone to lead their young defense. The middle linebacker is sort of like the quarterback of the defense, and I think having a good middle linebacker is super important to having a good defense. The Cardinals have plenty of holes on defense, but with a player of White's caliber on the board, I think you have to do it, and I think this is a really good pick for Arizona. With the 5th pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Greedy Williams, cornerback, LSU. This is a duplicate pick from the first mock draft. There will be a few duplicate picks, but I tried not to have too many. Looking at Williams, he's a very tall, long corner, 6'2", He's rangy. He has some very nice upside. And having a really good corner is extremely hard to get. And it's definitely good to have cornerbacks, especially when you have Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, and Drew Brees in your division. The Bucs have some young talent in their secondary, and all they need is a superstar, and then they can have one of the better secondaries in the NFL. And their defense has a lot of talent, so getting someone like Greedy Williams, I think that could really push their defense above the top. With the 6th pick, the New York Giants select Clelin Ferrell, defensive end out of Clemson. So last mock draft, I had the Giants going with Ferrell over Haskins, and I'm doing it again. I don't have the Giants going with Dwayne Haskins or even Kyler Murray now. I have them going with an edge rusher. I truly believe that the Giants might think that Eli Manning is still their guy, or they're going to go after a quarterback in free agency and then probably draft one next year. Maybe someone like a Tyrod Taylor or Joe Flacco, see how it works for a year. Maybe if they're desperate, Blake Bortles. Okay, maybe that's a little bit too desperate. And I can see the Giants going with another position that they need now, like edge rusher. Clelin Ferrell had a lot of college production at Clemson. He has 2 national championships, and I think he's a really solid player. He can definitely get to the quarterback. The Giants have some young talent in their front 7, and getting someone like Ferrell could be another really good piece for their defense. The 7th pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Dwayne Haskins, quarterback, Ohio State. So the Blake Bortles era is officially over in Jacksonville, and I have them going with Haskins. He has a good arm, solid throw power, solid throw accuracy. He's pretty mobile. He's not outstanding at one particular skill, but he's pretty good at everything. And if he can become outstanding at some skills, then I think he could be really good for the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have a lot of talent on their team, but they have some maturity issues, and they can't seem to put it together after a really good year last year. With the 8th pick, the Detroit Lions select Rashan Gary, defensive lineman out of Michigan. I know I've had 4 straight duplicate picks now. I promise there won't be another duplicate pick for a while, but this is such a perfect fit for the Detroit Lions and what they're looking for in a defensive player, what Matt Patricia wants on his defensive line, that hybrid-type player, that versatile player like Rashan Gary. Gary can play tackle, he can play end, and I think he's just a perfect fit for the Lions, not to mention he played his college ball in Michigan, so it just makes sense for both sides. The 9th pick, the Buffalo Bills select Jonah Williams, offensive tackle, Alabama. The Bills need to protect their golden goose in quarterback Josh Allen, and how do you do that? You get him offensive line. The Bills' offensive line is one of the worst in the NFL talent-wise. I'm pretty sure their most talented offensive lineman is Deion Dawkins, and I assume 80% of you don't even know who that is, so that says something. Obviously, if Josh Allen wants to become a better passer, he's going to need time to throw it instead of scrambling all day and just running the ball. And by doing that, you get yourself a left tackle in Jonah Williams, who's a very solid player. Wasn't great in the national championship, and his stock did drop a little bit, but it's just one game. It's not the end of the world. The Bills are getting probably the best offensive lineman in the draft. With the 10th pick, the Denver Broncos select Ed Oliver, defensive tackle, Houston. Ed Oliver is probably my favorite player in this year's draft. He's so athletic. He has so much upside. Reminds me a lot of Aaron Donald. Probably not as good of a pass rusher as Aaron Donald, but other than that, Ed Oliver is very similar. I originally had Ed Oliver going 4th to the Raiders. Obviously, the Raiders traded up to get BOSA. And I think this fits what Denver's looking for. They have 2 excellent edge rushers in Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. And adding an interior presence in Ed Oliver, that is without a doubt the scariest front 7 in the NFL. With the 11th pick, the Cincinnati Bengals select Jawaan Taylor, offensive tackle, Florida. Taylor is very athletic, he's raw, but I really like his upside. I really like these athletes who have very high upsides. That's like the type of draft prospect that I like, rather than someone who has a good floor but a low ceiling. So I am a pretty big fan of Jawaan Taylor. He does have a better chance of being a bust rather than someone like Greg Little, who is still on the board. But looking at Cincinnati, they've not had a good left tackle, or really a good offensive lineman in general, since Andrew Whitworth left in free agency. They did have Kevin Zeitler, but other than that, the Bengals need to fix their offensive line rather quickly, and getting someone with high upside like Jawan Taylor makes a lot of sense, and I think this could be a good pick for the Bengals. The 12th pick, the Green Bay Packers select Jachai Polite, edge rusher, Florida. So another player out of Florida who has a very high upside but a pretty low floor here in Jachai Polite. The Packers need help on the edge. Clay Matthews probably won't be back next year. Nick Chubb. Nick Perry isn't the player he once was, and Nick Perry was never a superstar anyway, but the Packers need help on the edge, and Jachai Polite is one of the better ones on the board. He's pretty athletic. He only has one good year of tape, which is his concern. He has a low floor, but this could be a really good pick, a home run pick potentially for the Packers. With the 13th pick, the Miami Dolphins select Kyler Murray, quarterback, Oklahoma. So the Heisman winner is finally off the board. He heads to South Beach. And I know the Dolphins did say they're looking for a quarterback in 2020, but they see Murray here, they see his explosiveness, and they take their franchise quarterback. There are a number of teams that could have picked Kyler Murray. Arizona, if they don't believe in Rosen, obviously. Maybe Oakland, maybe the Giants, the Broncos, maybe even the Bengals. But Ryan Tannehill is clearly not the answer in Denver, or not in Denver. Tannehill is clearly not the answer in Miami. And looking at Kyler Murray, he's very small, only 5'10", which would be the smallest quarterback in the NFL. But he has explosiveness, he's fast, he's very mobile, and he could be a really good quarterback for the Dolphins. With the 14th pick, the Atlanta Falcons select Christian Wilkins, defensive tackle, Clemson. I originally had the Falcons going with Derek Brown, and I probably still would had not Brown decided to return to school. But looking at Wilkins, he has been phenomenal for Clemson. One of the best defensive linemen in school history. The Falcons need a defensive tackle. Whether they bring back Grady Jarrett or not, they need another guy inside. The Falcons have talent on their defense. I really like their defense. They have players who I like. Deion Jones, Keanu Neal, Tack McKinley. I'm a huge fan of all three of them. I also really like head coach Dan Quinn. I think the Falcons made the right move by not firing him. So getting another guy inside like Christian Wilkins, I think could be really good for Atlanta. With the 15th pick, the Washington Redskins select Daniel Jones, quarterback, Duke. This is a duplicate pick from the last mock draft, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I originally had Drew Lock going ahead of him, but I think Jones has a higher upside than Drew Lock. And looking at the Washington Redskins, Alex Smith obviously had that devastating leg injury, and he's probably never going to play it down in the league again. And even if he does, he's 34, I believe, and he wasn't outstanding this year for the Redskins. He is locked up on a big contract, though, so smart on him to sign that. But looking at the Redskins, they need a quarterback. They have not had a really good quarterback in a while. And the last time a young player at that position has shown flashes is, of course, Robert Griffin III. Obviously, Kirk Cousins was a solid player. Alex Smith for the 10 games was solid. But they need themselves a new franchise quarterback. So they're going to go with Jones. With the 16th pick, the Carolina Panthers select Deontay Thompson, safety, Alabama. I feel like the Panthers could go with a number of options with this pick, but I have them going with one of the better players on the board in Thompson. The Panthers could use help in their secondary, mainly safety. Their only real bright spot in the secondary is second-round rookie Dante Jackson, who is really good at corner. But I feel like the Panthers need to build up a good defense again. They had a good defense back when they made the Super Bowl, and we haven't really seen that same team since. I don't think they've won a playoff game since they made the Super Bowl. And I think by getting someone as talented as Thompson, you can't really go wrong. With the 17th pick, the Cleveland Browns select N'Keal Harry, wide receiver, Arizona State. The Browns could go defense with this pick, but instead I have them getting themselves another playmaker for Baker Mayfield. The Browns receiving core isn't one of the best ones in the NFL. They have some talented players, like Jarvis Landry, but they could use another, and they're getting who I think is the best receiver in the draft in N'Keal Harry. He really can do it all. He's fast, he has good hands, and he's what you look for in your prototypical number 1 receiver, and I think he could be really beneficial for Mr. Mayfield. With the 18th pick, the Minnesota Vikings select Greg Little, offensive tackle, Ole Miss. The Vikings need help on their offensive line, and that is their biggest glaring and one of their only weaknesses on their roster, but they need a complete overhaul on their line. Getting someone like Little, I think, can do that. He doesn't have as high of an upside as Jawaan Taylor, but he has a much better floor, which I feel like the Vikings need to go safe and draft a player that they know will be good. Little is pretty athletic for his size. He just needs to work on his consistency, and if he does that, he can be a really good tackle in this league. We have a trade as the Los Angeles Chargers are trading up 9 picks with the Tennessee Titans. The Chargers will be getting the 19th pick as well as the 115th pick in the 4th round. Meanwhile, the Titans will be getting pick 28, which is, of course, the Chargers pick. And they will also be receiving the Chargers' 2nd round pick. I think this is solid value for both teams, especially the Titans. And let's see who the Chargers go with. With the 19th pick, the Los Angeles Chargers select Jeffrey Simmons, defensive tackle, Mississippi State. I feel like the Chargers have to draft a defensive tackle here, someone who can focus the attention off of players like Melvin Ingram and Joey BOSA so they can get to the quarterback easier. And perhaps the most talented one on the board is Simmons from Mississippi State. He's debatably a top 10 talent, but he does have some off-the-field concerns. If the Chargers can fix that up, then this will be a steal at 19, and the trade will definitely be worth it. The 20th pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Byron Murphy, cornerback, Washington. Murphy is a very high IQ football player. I like his upside, and I like his production at the University of Washington. The Steelers need an extra corner, as Artie Burnt was terrible this year, and Mike Hilton is a free agent, so the Steelers absolutely need to go that route. And the best one on the board, in my opinion, is Byron Murphy. In my last mock draft, I had them getting another corner in DeAndre Baker. They could go with Baker as well, but I have been going with Murphy. I've seen Murphy go higher in mock drafts. I think this is good value for either one of them, but I have the Steelers going with Murphy. With the 21st pick, the Seattle Seahawks select Zach Allen, defensive end, or edge rusher, Boston College. The Seahawks need some more edge help. Frank Clark is a free agent. In my last mock draft, I have been going with Jachai Polite, who is an edge rusher, so same concept here with Allen. The Seahawks need to build up their defense again. Obviously, the Legion of Boom was very good, and if they have a younger Legion of Boom 2.0, then I think the Seahawks can return to the promised land by getting some pass rush in a player like Zach Allen. With the 22nd pick, the Baltimore Ravens select DK Metcalf, wide receiver, Ole Miss. In my original mock draft, I had him going 9th to the Bills, which, looking at it, that's extremely risky for someone who has such a low floor, not a lot of tape, and someone who has an injury history. But at the same time, I really like his upside. He's fast, he's very tall, he's that go up and get it, I got it quarterback, I got it. He's that type of player who you can just sail a 50-yard pass in the end zone, one-on-one. He's coming down with it, which I think is good for Lamar Jackson. Obviously, he's not the greatest of passers, and if he feels more comfortable throwing it down the field, knowing that Metcalf is probably going to come down with it and it's not going to be an interception, then I think that'll increase Lamar Jackson's confidence, and he will potentially look to go deep more often. And if he throws the ball more, then the Ravens' offense becomes non-one-dimensional, extremely scary, and you don't know what to expect when you're playing them, whether Lamar Jackson's going to use his feet or use his arm. With the 23rd pick, the Houston Texans select David Edwards, offensive tackle, Wisconsin. I originally had them going with Byron Murphy, the corner from Washington, which they could go with a corner, but I feel like they need to go offensive line. They need to protect Deshaun Watson. He had way too little time to throw it, and if Deshaun Watson has a good offensive line, then I think he has a legit shot to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. if he has blockers. He has a pretty good receiving core with DeAndre Hopkins, who's outstanding. Will Fuller, solid player. KK Kute, I think, has a solid chance to be pretty good. But the Texans' offensive line is just too pitiful, and you need a good offensive line to win playoff games. Obviously, the Texans were at home against the Colts, and they got clobbered. It wasn't all the offensive line's fault, but if they had a good offensive line, then it would have been a lot easier for Deshaun Watson to make plays, and the Texans would have scored more than 7 points. The 24th pick, the Arizona Cardinals select Brian Burns, edge rusher, Florida State. Remember, this pick does belong to the Raiders, but I have them trading it to the Cardinals, which helped the Raiders get the number 1 overall pick to get Nick BOSA. I think Brian Burns could go in the top 10. I think he could go in the late 2nd rounds. I have no clue where he's going to end up, but it's really good to get a good pass rusher, someone like Brian Burns. I think he has first-round talent. He should go in the 1st round. And a team like Arizona, who has one of the better edge rushers in the NFL in Chandler Jones, he needs a compliment, and I think someone like Brian Burns can be a really nice compliment. With the 25th pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Cody Ford, offensive lineman, Oklahoma. This is the same pick I had in the first mock draft. And looking at the Eagles, I've seen a lot of mock drafts go defensive line, mainly defensive end. And that doesn't really make sense to me. The Eagles have Derek Barnett. They have Michael Bennett, who's older. I get that. But they have some young guys below him. Someone like a Josh Sweat, who they picked in the 4th round out of Florida State. I thought that was good value. I think he could develop. And the Eagles' biggest need is not defensive line. It's definitely on the left side of their offensive line. Left guard, I believe that's Stephen Wisniewski, Isaac Seumalo, not great. Left tackle, they have Jason Peters, who is about 87 years old. I don't think he's going to be back next year. I expect him to retire. And even if he does, the Eagles need to prepare for life after him. And looking at Cody Ford, he was a huge part of the Oklahoma offensive line for 2 Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. And he's versatile. He can play guard or tackle, so the Eagles can put him in a number of places. With the 26th pick, the Indianapolis Colts select A.J. Brown, wide receiver, Ole Miss. I want to say I had the Colts going A.J. Brown. It was either him or N'Keal Harry. It might have been Harry, but I had him going with a wide receiver, and I have him doing the same. The Colts' offense was very good this year, but I think they could add another receiver. T.Y. Hilton's solid, but I believe he's 30 now. And outside of that, their receiving core isn't great. So getting another weapon for Andrew Luck on this offense, I feel like could make him even better. Looking at Brown, he doesn't quite have the ceiling that DK Metcalf has, but he has a much better floor than Metcalf. Brown is very polished. He's very NFL ready. He's a good route runner, good hands, pretty fast. And he's what you look for in a receiver. I don't think he's going to become a superstar, but I'd be very shocked if he becomes a bust. With the 27th pick, the Oakland Raiders select Marquise Brown, wide receiver, Oklahoma. I had this in my last mock draft, and I'm having it again. I think it makes perfect sense for the Raiders to get a receiver like Hollywood Brown. He's a deep threat, very fast. He makes big plays. He stretches the field, which I think is really good for Oakland, as their receiving core is not very good. Jordy Nelson didn't work out. Martavis Bryant obviously didn't work out. And I feel like they need to get themselves another weapon for Derek Carr. Getting them someone like Marquise Brown who can burn defenders. Derek Carr can throw it up. Hollywood Brown makes the catch. 78-yard touchdown. I could see that happening a lot if the Raiders do go with him. With the 28th pick, the Tennessee Titans select Jalen Ferguson, edge rusher, Louisiana Tech. I think this is a very solid pick for the Titans. It fits a need of edge rusher, and Jalen Ferguson has a ton of college productivity. He broke Terrell Suggs' sack record for LA Tech, and the Titans need, as I said, they need an edge rusher. They drafted Harold Landry last year, who had a pretty good rookie year, but they need someone else. And they're starting to build a really solid front seven. They have Rashawn Evans. They have Jarrell Casey, who's a really good player. I know those are only 4 guys, and you need 7 to have a front seven, but the Titans are going in the right direction to building a good defense. Not to mention, they have one of the better, or at least one of the more talented secondaries in the league. With the 29th pick, the New England Patriots select Drew Lock, quarterback, Missouri. The Patriots could try to go for a player who can contribute right now, but I feel like you have to start thinking about life after Tom Brady. It looks like he's starting to take small steps down. He didn't quite have as good of a year this year as he did last year. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but I'm just saying he didn't play like an MVP, at least not yet. Maybe he will in the AFC Championship and the Super Bowl if they make it. But looking at Drew Lock, he's a solid quarterback. He has a good arm. He's not spectacular. I don't really like his upside compared to like Dwayne Haskins or even Kyler Murray. And I think this is a risky pick for New England because they're probably not getting themselves a star. And if the Patriots don't have an extremely talented team, but if they can convince Bill Belichick to stick around once Brady retires, which I somewhat doubt, and if Bill Belichick can nurture him and mold him into a really good player, then this could be a solid pick for New England if he fits what Bill Belichick wants in a quarterback. With the 30th pick, I have the Denver Broncos trading up with the Green Bay Packers. The Packers will receive the 41st pick as well as a 2023rd and a 2027th from the Broncos. So Denver's trading up 11 picks to come back in the first round. Last time they traded up in the first round, they drafted Paxton Lynch. Obviously, that didn't work out. Let's see if the Broncos go with a quarterback or some other position. With the 30th pick, the Denver Broncos select NASIR Adderley, safety, Delaware. So this is not a quarterback. We're going to assume that the Broncos traded up before they knew Drew Lock was going to be taken. So, sorry Broncos, you don't get Drew Lock. I don't think Will Grier is first-round talent. So the Broncos are going to go with NASIR Adderley, a player who fits a need at safety. As Darian Stewart, he's not getting any younger. Justin Simmons, solid player, but he's on the last year of his contract. And while Adderley did not play the best of competition, playing for an FCS school, I think he has some pretty solid potential. And I think this is a solid pick for Denver, going with a risky player, because obviously he's playing for Delaware. That's all you need to know. But he has some talent. He was very good this year at Delaware, and he fits a need. So solid pick by Denver. With the 31st pick, the Los Angeles Rams select AMANI ORUWARIYE. I know I butchered that probably. Cornerback, Penn State. Looking at the Rams, Aqib Talib. He was injured for a decent portion of the year. He's not getting any younger. He's not getting any better. And Marcus Peters is a somewhat overrated cornerback. He's really not that good. He just has good hands and is a solid player. So corner is one of the bigger needs for the Rams. So they're going to go with ORUWARIYE from Penn State. The Rams don't have a lot of holes. They have an extremely talented team. Peters and Talib are still pretty good. But ORUWARIYE can learn and develop behind them. Hopefully he doesn't learn and develop off the field issues, which both Peters and Talib are known for having in the past. And I don't think that'll be too big of an issue. I think this is a pretty solid value pick for the Rams. Fits a need, and what else can you do? Probably trade the pick. Yeah, the Rams are probably going to trade this pick for a really good player, but if they don't, I could see them going with ORUWARIYE. And with the 32nd pick, the Kansas City Chiefs select Josh Jacobs, running back, Alabama. The Chiefs could go defense, which is a huge need. But obviously with the Kareem Hunt situation, running back is now a little bit of a need as well. It seems like Josh Jacobs will be the first one taken. It didn't seem like he was the primary back or even the second back at Bama for a decent amount of times this year. But he's probably the best NFL prospect around the running backs in the draft. I could see him going higher as his stock is actually really going higher after a very solid playoff against Oklahoma and Clemson. And I think this is a pretty good value pick for Kansas City, filling a need, but their defense is still not super good. Now that we're in the second round, we're going to start going rapid fire, making these picks a lot quicker. So the 33rd pick, the Arizona Cardinals select KELVIN, wide receiver, North Carolina State. Harmon's a very solid target for Josh Rosen. Larry Fitzgerald might retire, and the Cardinals' receiving core, with or without Larry Fitzgerald, is not one of the better ones in the NFL. And getting someone like Harmon, who is debatably a late first-round talent in the second round, I think is a good value pick for Arizona. Indianapolis Colts select DeAndre Baker, cornerback from Georgia. This pick is from the New York Jets, and they got it from trading up to select Sam Darnold last year. The Colts have a solid cornerback group. We've seen players like Quincy Wilson improve, Kenny Moore II having a really good year, but DeAndre Baker has so much college production, won the Jim Thorpe Award this year at Georgia, and this is a solid pick for Indianapolis. The Cardinals are right back on the clock via the Oakland Raiders, which is how the Raiders got Nick Bosa. And I have the Cardinals going Dalton Risner, offensive lineman, Kansas State. The Cardinals' offensive line is far from complete, and when you have an offensive line like the Cardinals, and there's a versatile offensive lineman on the board, you have to take him. Risner can play center, he can play tackle, he's not really a guard compared to those other two positions, but he probably could play guard. And he can play all 5 offensive line positions, so the Cardinals are bound to find him a home somewhere. I have the New England Patriots trading up. Yes, the Patriots are actually moving up. I have them going to 36. That should say 36, not 46. And I also have them getting 194 from the San Francisco 49ers for pick 61, 125 in a 2023. I think this is solid value for New England, but I think San Francisco is getting a decent amount of assets as well, so it's not a terrible deal for San Francisco. The New England Patriots select Noah Fant, tight end, Iowa. This is a player I really like. Fant is very athletic, and he has really good hands for a tight end, vertical threat, and the Patriots love to run 2 tight end sets. We don't know if Rob Gronkowski is going to be the same player that he was a few years ago. And even if he is, it's good for the Patriots to have another tight end. They like going 2 tight ends. Obviously, it worked when they have Gronk and that Aaron Hernandez guy. So doing it with Gronk and Noah Fant, and even if Gronk leaves, having Noah Fant as your tight end could be a really solid replacement for Gronk. I have the New York Giants selecting Devin Bush, the linebacker from Michigan. I have the Giants continuing to improve their front 7. They've really focused on offense the past couple of years in the draft, so I figure it makes sense to go defense, especially when there's no good quarterback on the board. And getting a middle linebacker, as I mentioned with Devin White with the Cardinals, middle linebacker is like your quarterback of the defense. Having a good middle linebacker is extremely helpful for the defense, and Devin Bush is a very solid leader and a very solid pick at 37. I have the Jaguars going Martez Ivey, guard, Florida. The Jaguars obviously did not have a good year last year, and that starts at the line of scrimmage, winning battles at the line, improving on the offensive line. Andrew Norwell, their big free agent signing last year, is a very solid player, but he was injured for a decent bit of last year, and the Jaguars could use an extra guard. A.J. Cann isn't anything special, so I have them going in-state and getting Martez Ivey, a very solid player from the Florida Gators. With the 39th pick, the Buccaneers get Montez Sweat. I've seen him going the first round in a lot of mock drafts, so good value. And if the Bucs get Gritty Williams, then their only real weakness on the defense will be edge rusher. So getting a talented edge rusher in Montez Sweat would be very beneficial for Tampa Bay. The Bills select Dexter Lawrence, defensive tackle from Clemson. Kyle Williams is retiring, so the Bills need that new guy inside. Lawrence is a big boy. He can force some double teams, which means some of the other pass rushers like Shaq Lawson and Trent Murphy, it'll be easier for them to get to the quarterback. Lawrence is pretty athletic. He's sort of a risk, but he has a high ceiling, and I think this could be a solid pick for Buffalo. This pick is from the Denver Broncos. The Packers now have it, and I have them going Tavon Coney, linebacker, Notre Dame. The Packers need to improve their defense. I already have them going Jacki Polite, and now they're starting to build their secondary in last year's draft. Now they're building up their linebacking core in this year's draft, and if Polite and Coney end up being good players, then the Packers' defense may actually be good for once. Carl Lawson's a very solid young pass rusher, but Carlos Dunlap isn't getting any younger, so I have the Bengals going with OSHANE. OSHANE, I cannot even try that last name from Old Dominion. And Carlos Dunlap is still a good player, so for right now, OSHANE will be a pretty solid rotational pass rusher. But once Carlos Dunlap probably, I guess, leaves in free agency, then he could be a really solid player alongside Lawson. Darius Slay is one of the best corners in the NFL, but the Lions need someone across him. Teez Tabor is young, but he hasn't shown anything in his NFL career, so I have him going with Trayvon Mullen, who was really good in the playoffs. He had a pick against Alabama, and I think this is a very solid pick for my Lions. I have the Packers going Damien Harris, running back, Alabama. Harris was the most productive back on the roster for most of the year, and it seems like the Packers need a good running back, and if they have a good running back, then they can be an elite team. The team was very different with and without Aaron Jones throughout the year, so you're probably wondering, why would they ditch Jones? That's because it's good to have two running backs. Jamal Williams isn't insanely special, and if Harris is super good, he can be the bell cow back, and Aaron Jones, he can get some carries. Definitely a good goal line, good power back, and I think Harris and Jones could be a really good tandem. Next, I have the Atlanta Falcons going to Elgton Jenkins, center. Can probably play guard as well, from Mississippi State. Alex Mack is phenomenal, but he's getting up there, and it's always good to draft offensive linemen, as I've probably said about 15,000 times in this video. So Jenkins is a pretty solid value pick for Atlanta, and it doesn't hurt to start preparing for life after Mack. Next up is the Washington Redskins. They're going to go Chris Boyd, corner from Texas. I'd be a little bit surprised if Josh Norman's on the roster next year. And even so, he's not as good as he was during that year with Carolina and even his early years in Washington. So it's good to add some corner depth. I have the Panthers getting guard Chris Lindstrom from Boston College. The Panthers don't have nearly as bad of an offensive line as a team like the Vikings and the Texans. And the Panthers have some talented young players like Taylor Moton, Darrell Williams, who is a free agent, Trey Turner. But their offensive line isn't great. Cam Newton was very banged up towards the end of the year, and Christian McCaffrey, he's a running back, so running backs get banged up easier, and McCaffrey is very small, he's not the strongest, and while he's super explosive, he can lose his explosiveness with a couple scary injuries, which I think is why the Panthers need to invest in their offensive line and have 5 really solid starters. The Dolphins are going to pick Draymond Jones, defensive tackle, Ohio State. They could go offense to help out Kyler Murray, but I think this is really good value getting Jones in the middle of the second round. They need some help on their defensive line. They have some solid pieces. Charles Harris is okay. Devon Gottschall is a player I like, but they need an extra defensive tackle, and they could probably use an edge rusher as well, since Cameron Wake, while he's still very productive, he's not getting any younger, but Draymond Jones is one of the best players on the board, and I feel this is a good pick. Speaking of defensive tackles with really good value, I have the Browns picking Jerry Tillery from Notre Dame. The Browns could use some help in the interior of their defensive line. They have Larry Ogunjobi, who's one of the more young, underrated players in the league. They have Myles Garrett at edge rusher, who I think can be the second or third best edge rusher in the NFL behind Khalil Mack and maybe J.J. Watt in no time. But the Browns could use another defensive tackle alongside Ogunjobi, and Jerry Tillery is really good value at this spot in the draft, and I think this is a good pick for Cleveland. The Vikings still need offensive line. While Greg Little is a really solid pick, he's not going to totally complete the offensive line. The Vikings have 2 young tackles now in Little and Brian O'Neill, but the Vikings need some players in the interior of their offensive line as well, so I have them getting Ben Schweisel, I hope I said that right, from Offensive Lineman University, a.k.a. Wisconsin. I think this is a really good pick for the Vikings. They're still addressing their biggest need, which is offensive line, and if they get a good offensive line, I think they can be a legit contender to win the Super Bowl. I have the Titans picking up Taylor Rapp, the safety from Washington. In my last mock draft, I have him getting Deonthe Thompson in the first round. I think safety is a little bit of a need while they have Kevin Byard, who is really good. Kenny Vaccaro's contract is up, and I don't know if the Titans are going to bring him back. So assuming they don't, they will need another safety. Jonathan Cyprien is a meh player, so I have him going with Taylor Rapp, pretty solid player out of Washington, and the Titans continuing to build up a very solid young defense. I have the Steelers picking up the younger brother of Falcons wide receiver Calvin Ridley and Riley Ridley from Georgia. This is assuming Antonio Brown is not on the roster last year. The Steelers like to have 3 talented receivers, and assuming they trade Brown, their receiving core would be Juju Smith-Schuster, James Washington, and Riley Ridley, which I think is a really solid young core. All of those guys are in their either rookie year, second year, or third year, and I think that's a pretty solid pick for Pittsburgh. The Eagles are going to be picking up a very talented playmaker for their offense and running back David Montgomery. They could look to improve the secondary with this pick, but the Eagles running back towards the end of the season was Josh Adams, an undrafted rookie, who I was high on headed into last year's draft, but he's not really the answer. Jay Ajayi's probably going to go into free agency, and even if he does stick around, he has a lot of injury history. Wendell Smallwood isn't that good. Darren Sproles' bones are made of glass, so the Eagles could use help at running back. Montgomery was extremely productive for the Cyclones, and I think the Eagles' offense is definitely improving with this draft. I have the Houston Texans picking up T.J. Hawkinson, the John Mackey Award winner from Iowa. I do have his fellow tight end teammate Noah Fant going ahead of him, and I like Fant more than Hawkinson, but T.J. Hawkinson is a really solid player as well. I've seen him go a lot higher in mock drafts, and the Texans sort of could use a tight end, as they has T.J. Fedorowicz, who I want to say went to Iowa as well. Talented young player, but retired due to concussions, and getting another weapon for Deshaun Watson could be really good for their offense. The Houston Texans are right back on the clock, and I have them going with Julian Love, corner from Notre Dame. The Texans need help at corner. They have a lot of talent in their secondary, but I feel like they could use help at corner as Jonathan Joseph isn't getting any younger. Kareem Jackson is more of a safety, and Kevin Johnson is sort of looking like a bust. So if they're going with Love here, I think this is a pretty solid value pick at 55. It's not an insane steal, but it's a position of need and drafting someone who's a late second, early third round prospect. The New England Patriots are going to be selecting the hard-hitting safety out of Miami, Jaquan Johnson. New England likes to have multiple good safeties, and while their safety core is pretty solid, Devin McCourty, Patrick Chung, and Duron Harmon, the Patriots aren't going to want to pay all 3 of them starter-level money, and all of them are either over 30 or right around 30, so none of them are super young. Getting some youth at that safety spot I think could be very beneficial for New England, and Jaquan Johnson is pretty good value at 56. Philadelphia Eagles will be going defense with T.J. Edwards, the linebacker from Wisconsin. The Eagles need to work on their linebacking cores. Jordan Hicks is a free agent this offseason. Nigel Bradham and Camus Grugier-Hill aren't exceptional, so I'm going to have them going with T.J. Edwards from Wisconsin. Pretty solid player. Fits a need for the Eagles. They could go secondary, which I mentioned with the David Montgomery pick, but there aren't a lot of good defensive backs, mainly cornerbacks, on the board. So I feel like the Eagles need to go value, and they're still getting a position of need. Dallas Cowboys will be selecting Irv Smith, a tight end from Bama. There was a lot of rumors that he would stay at school, but I believe he has declared for the NFL draft. The Cowboys need to find their Jason Witten replacement. Jeff Swaim, not too special. Dalton Schultz, not too special. So I have him going with Irv Smith, a player who I like, was very productive this year for the Crimson Tide, and I think this is really good value for Dallas. The Colts have been building up their offensive line. They drafted Quentin Nelson and Braden Smith last year. Both of them were extremely good, but it doesn't hurt to get more offensive line, so I have him going with the versatile Michael Dieter from Wisconsin. This is the 3rd Wisconsin Badger offensive lineman drafted, and not to mention Tyler Biadasz, who decided to return to school, is a really good player, probably would be top 15 had he decided to declare for the draft. As I mentioned, Dieter is versatile. He can play multiple positions on the offensive line, and the Colts offense has really improved during the draft. The Tennessee Titans will be drafting another talented defensive player to put in their front 7 in Isaiah Buggs from Alabama. Buggs isn't really talked about, but I know he was injured for a decent amount of the championship game against Clemson, and their defense had one of the worst performances in school history for a reason. Buggs isn't really talked about among the top Alabama defensive linemen, obviously Quinnen Williams, and you may even mention Raekwon Davis in that sentence, but not Buggs. He's very underrated, and I think this is a good pick for Tennessee. He's more of a defensive end, but I could see him potentially be able to play tackle as well, and the Titans are drafting another player for their young and improving defense. San Francisco 49ers will be going with Juan Thornhill, the versatile defensive back from Virginia. Just want to mention that last Titans pick was via the Chargers in the trade I had earlier, and this pick is via the New England Patriots in a trade I had as well. I think this is a pretty good pick for San Francisco. They have some talented players in their secondary. Richard Sherman, Jaquiski Tart, Adrian Colbert's all right. Juan Thornhill can play safety as well as corner. I view him more as a safety. He's pretty raw, but I like his upside, and I think this is a good pick for San Francisco. The New Orleans Saints will be selecting Will Grier, quarterback, West Virginia. This is the Saints' first pick of the draft, and while they could draft someone to improve their Super Bowl chances next year, I feel like they've traded a lot of draft assets away. They didn't have their first-round pick this year. That belongs to Green Bay. For them to move up and draft for raw defensive end Marcus Davenport. Their third-round pick is gone. That helped them get Teddy Bridgewater, which that was kind of a waste of a trade. They didn't really need Teddy. So it's about time that you start thinking about life after Drew Brees. So we're going with Will Grier, quarterback from West Virginia. I'm not too high on Will Grier, and I don't think he is second-round caliber, but I know a lot of scouts are high on him, and I have the Saints pulling the trigger on their quarterback. The Kansas City Chiefs have the next two picks, and the last two picks of the video. I have them going with Trey Lamar, inside linebacker from Clemson. The Chiefs' defense needs a lot of work. Anthony Hitchens is a solid player. Reggie Ragland's contract is up soon, so the Chiefs need that leader on their defense. As I've said before, the middle linebacker is sort of a quarterback of the defense, and having a really good middle linebacker is super important. And the Chiefs have some solid middle linebackers, but neither of them are superstars, and I think Trey Lamar is a solid value pick. And then with the 64th pick, they're going with Yadni Kajuste from West Virginia. That's a very hard name. Offensive lineman, probably going to play left tackle as the meme Eric Fisher. He's okay. He's not great. Mitchell Schwartz on the right side, though, is a really good offensive lineman. The Chiefs' offensive line isn't bad, but it's not spectacular. That's the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. I'm out. Have a good one.